G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard, now I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hearing that racket. Dots came in, you know how to stack it. Don't take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slurry. Got a blast, bro.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. How we doing, baby? This is the voice in your ears, Adam Caplan, fresh off of UFC 281 at New York's own Madison Square Garden. Man, oh man, what a night. This is why we watch the sport of MMA. This is why we love it. It was just a spectacle. You know, you're at the legendary MSG. You got Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier. You got Carla Esparza versus Zhang Weili. And then you got Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. And they just blew the fucking roof off that place. I mean, let's get into it right away. Look, Michael Chandler versus Dustin Poirier. Look, one thing that I don't like about this fight is that it wasn't 5 rounds. Would have loved to see it as a 5-round main event on that December 3rd card. You know, I know everyone's thinking you don't want to see Holland versus Wonderboy for 5 rounds. I don't know, versus Poirier versus Chandler. No, I don't. I would have loved to see that fight 5 rounds in December 3rd in Orlando, Florida, but we got it in MSG. Look, I mean, Dustin Poirier had a slow first round, wasn't utilizing his jab, was throwing that left hook a little bit too short and a little bit too slow, and Michael Chandler came forward with those looping punches, came forward with that K1 style pace that he's learned from Henry Hooft over the years, and he put it on Dustin Poirier. He really fucking put it on him. And at some points, everyone was thinking, oh yes, that money line that I put on the underdog is really paying off. And then slowly what started happening is you could start to see that Chandler was getting lost in the moment. What starts to happen with Chandler is when the crowd gets behind his lunacy, he loses himself. He is a Missouri wrestler. He's wrestled out of the University of Missouri, okay? And he had Dustin Poirier on the ground, and instead of looking for maintaining the position, he went for the submission. And that, for me, was the biggest detriment to Michael Chandler. It wasn't, in fact, trying to box the head off of Dustin Poirier, because it was working. It was working for the most part until Dustin found his feet and found his range and found his timing. But until then, there were moments in the grappling exchanges where Michael Chandler shouldn't have gone for the rear naked choke. He should have maintained the position. And this is always going to be Michael Chandler's Achilles heel, is that he always takes the hardest path to victory. He should have wrestled Dustin Poirier. He should have kept him down, utilized those strikes on the feet, back up Dustin against the cage, take him down, and maintain position, similar to what we've seen in Khabib Nurmagomedov, maybe perhaps minus the grapevine. And that really stood out to me, is how time and time again, Michael Chandler puts on these fucking crazy fights. He is one of my favorite fighters in the UFC in such a short time. Look at the impact he's made in such a short time. But it just breaks my heart to see that he always takes the hardest path to victory. So Dustin Poirier ends up putting it on Michael Chandler in that second and third round. And then there you have it, third round, rear naked choke finish for Dustin Poirier. He gets on the mic with old Joe, Uncle Joe, and he goes, you know, that boy still got jiu-jitsu. And it's true. Dustin Poirier is a savage on the ground. He's had a lethal darts choke for a very long time. And you've seen it in this fight against Chandler, that the Mizzou wrestler costs himself the victory by looking for the submission instead of maintaining his position. But El Diamante took advantage of that, showed that he is a black belt in jiu-jitsu from American Top Team. Also trained under Tim Crowder for a very long time in Louisiana, who's also a black belt. I believe he was the first black belt in Louisiana, Tim Crowder. Shout out to him. Snatched the neck of Michael Chandler, that little 2-inch neck of him, and took it home, baby. So shout out to El Diamante, who I believe has now made his hot sauce the new official hot sauce of the UFC, which is a fucking another unbelievable feat. I mean, he has 13 performance bonuses from the UFC. So I guess 13 times 50,000. Brett's no accountant, but I'm sure he could do the math. That's bank, baby. And on top of that, he's got knockout victories over guys like Conor McGregor. He's got war victories against legends like Max Holloway as well. And now he's got a beautiful rear naked choke victory against Michael Chandler. And that was just an amazing, amazing fight. And we knew, and the fans knew, that the second the UFC put that fight on the card, that is what solidified that card to be exactly what it was. And it also raised the shit out of ticket sales. Dustin Poirier and Chandler almost doubled the ticket sales after that fight was announced. And you could believe that. So what's next for them? Dustin was pretty complimentary of Beneil Dariush. I love the matchup as well. And for Michael Chandler, although he was calling out Conor McGregor, I don't know if McGregor's going down to 155, and I don't know if he wants to give Michael Chandler that opportunity for the red panties. So perhaps we might see Michael Chandler versus Matuz's Gamrot, which I love that fight. We'll bring the fight out of Michael Chandler in a different way, in a way that we've perhaps wanted to see out of Michael Chandler over his last two fights, which is indeed his wrestling. And we know for sure that Gamrot is a motherfucker on the ground as well as a wrestler. So that'll bring out a different fight and a different tenacity and prep out of Michael Chandler that perhaps he may even need in his career at this point. So I'm no career advisor, I'm no MMA fighter, but I'd love to actually see Michael Chandler fight a grappler. So Matuz's Gamrot versus Chandler stands out to me, maybe Dos Anjos. And then for Dustin Poirier, I would have to say Beneil Dariush. Maybe they want to go the rematch with Charlie Olives. I don't think so. I think he wants to fight a guy off of a win. He wants to fight the guy who's one above him in Dariush. So Dariush versus El Diamante, Dustin Poirier. Let's hit it, baby. Not going to spend too much time on Zhang Weili versus Carla Esparza because Carla Esparza, did exactly what we thought she was going to do, and that was underperform, sadly. I don't like to be that critical of fighters, but we as the fans and the analysts and, the podcasters and everybody out there and their grandmother knew that Zhang Weili is the more dynamic, the more dominant, and the future of the strawweight division, and it's not Carla Esparza. Credit to her, though. Carla Esparza is a veteran. She's a pioneer of the sport and the division. She won the inaugural strawweight Ultimate Fighter Series, where she was then crowned champion. Had a little bit of success. Then it was a little bit of win-loss, whatever it was. I haven't looked at the stats per se completely, but it was very on and off until she had won the title in her last bout against Rose Namajunas in a very underwhelming matchup. But she still got to walk down the aisle to marry her husband in that UFC title, so I'm sure that meant a lot to her. And look, Zhang Weili just came out there, utilized her athleticism. She beat her in every facet. Her boxing was on point. Her kickboxing was on point. But more so, what really set the difference was she showed that she was the better grappler against a wrestler in Carla Esparza. She murked her on the ground. It looked as if a few times she was going to win with a one-armed rear naked choke. She ended up getting the tap against Carla Esparza. Congratulations to Zhang Weili. And it just shows how things change so quickly in the UFC. Zhang Weili was getting booed when she was fighting against Rose Namajunas, and it was controversial, that boo, because people maybe thought that, she was getting booed for other reasons, but that wasn't the case. They were getting behind Rose Namajunas, their fellow patriot, and then you fast forwarded, to quote Pete Carroll, he was like, you'd think that Zhang Weili was from Manhattan. She was getting praise to the nines and getting cheered so loudly by the fans the entire week. So she deserves it. She's a great representation of the sport and the division. And I think that her style and her just her overall look and vibe and just the way she fucking performs in the octagon, it don't matter whether or not she could speak English. It don't matter where she's from, whatever the case may be. People want to see Zhang Weili fight. That's for damn sure. So let's see that let's see how that unfolds, because Zhang Weili might have Amanda Lemos next. Carla Esparza, I'm not sure. I'm not sure what's next for her. Moving on, we got the main event. I mean, shit. Israel Adesanya versus Alex Pereira. This was a tough one for me. I'm going to have to take a sip for this one. You got the storyline there where Pereira bested Israel Adesanya twice in the kickboxing realm. People say that the first fight should have gone Izzy's way by decision, and then in the second fight, Izzy did get the standing 8 count, and then the following round, Izzy also claims that it was a long standing 8 count, kind of like a Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 8 count, where it could have been 12 seconds, but they counted 8, which gave Pereira more time to recover. That's what Izzy says. And then in the second fight, and then the next following round, Alex Pereira ended up knocking out Israel Adesanya, and then we fast forward to UFC 281. Alex Pereira has more or less been fast-tracked to this position in fighting Izzy, so that we have this mega event and mega fight in Israel Adesanya versus Pereira, and it also gives Israel Adesanya an opportunity to finally meet his match in the octagon. Then fuck, man, that's exactly what happened. I was telling Brett before the show that Israel and Alex fought in a range that was not typical to other MMA fights and other fights that Izzy has fought in, and even Alex Pereira. These guys were fighting in a phone booth. They fought in that glory-style kickboxing range. These guys were neck and neck with each other, and that's what kept us on our toes throughout the entire fight, was the range that they were fighting at. They were fighting in such a close range that you knew at any moment somebody could indeed get knocked out, especially in the fact that both of these guys are specialists in what they do. First round was very, very close. Safe to say that Izzy secured the round by almost finishing Alex Pereira. If there would have been 5 or 10 seconds left, I think that Izzy would have retained his title. But in the end, Izzy landed a left hook exactly when the bell rang. Some people said it could have been late. I thought the timing was okay, but Alex Pereira recovered very well and then indeed won the second round. And he as well solidified it with a takedown at the end of that second round. And then that third round, which put a smile on AC's face, because the analysis last week or the week before, the episode before, was that Izzy needs to utilize his grappling and utilize a little bit of his clinch wrestling, and that's exactly what he did in the third round. Did it look amazing? Maybe not. Did it work? Absolutely it did. And why? Because Alex Pereira does not have a ground game. Guys like Chimaev, guys like Whitaker, maybe even Marvin Vettori, Jack Hermanson are licking their lips at getting in the octagon with Alex Pereira because they are not confident in his ground game at all. So in that third round, when Izzy was dominant with his grappling, that was nice to see. And someone was talking to me after the fight, and they were a little bit critical that Izzy didn't go for a sub attempt. He didn't go to put in that second hook to go for the rear naked choke. You know, and then he almost was complimenting Chandler on how even though he wasn't successful at the choke, he's always looking for the finish. But that was exactly his detriment. That's what I spoke about before, was that the reason why Chandler didn't win is because he was looking for the submission over the position. And Israel Adesanya took the position over the submission. And that's exactly why he won that third round. And he may, in fact, have worn out Alex Pereira to have to take off the fourth round, because a lot of folks were saying Pereira was so inactive in the fourth round that perhaps he was taking the round off. And then perhaps also Izzy took advantage of that as well. But one thing you know, or one thing that you could bet, is you never take off the final round against a kickboxer or a Muay Thai fighter, especially a Muay Thai fighter, because they are conditioned to turn up the volume in the fifth round to a volume that perhaps they didn't even know they were capable of performing at. And Glover Teixeira and Alex Pereira's corner were in Alex's face telling him, you are down in this fight. You absolutely have to knock out the champion in order for you to win. I didn't like as much as I love the range that these guys were fighting at, I didn't like Izzy's strategy when his back was up against the cage. I would have liked that as soon as that back heel touched the cage or his shoulder blades touched the cage, that he would either circle or he would fire off a 2-3, a right hand, a left hook, and then look to get off of the cage and then retake the center of the octagon. And he didn't do that. He didn't do that, Izzy. He kept backing up against the cage, using that long guard. They were using a lot of hand fighting, which, you know, showed that Muay Thai and that kickboxing as well, their backgrounds. And I just didn't like the strategy with the chin up in the air, the hand fighting. There was no head movement. There was no looking to circle. Izzy told us later that that peroneal nerve was indeed shot due to a leg kick from Alex Pereira, which is why he fell over and did that backward somersault to try to get away from Pereira, because he basically fell over. But anyways, then that fifth round happens, and you see that the fatigue, the wear and tear from both fighters have absolutely set in, but one guy has a little bit more dog in his bite, or, you know, has something in him, and that's Alex Pereira. He's coming forward at Israel Adesanya, and Israel, again, is looking a little bit too comfortable, a little bit too reluctant to move off of that cage, and fuck, there it goes, that short left uppercut or that short left hook. I'd like to say where the angle of the elbow was, it was more of a short left uppercut. It was like a 5-inch punch, to be honest. It put Israel Adesanya in dreamland. He was, you know, he wasn't there. He says that he was conscious, but, you know, he was starting to look at the floor. He was getting, you know, strikes were getting landed on him. I hate to be disrespectful in this moment because he was so dominant throughout the whole fight, but the strikes were starting to land on Israel Adesanya, and Mark Goddard did indeed make the right decision, because perhaps a knee was coming next, perhaps an even bigger left hook was coming next, and I just didn't want to see Israel Adesanya fold like a wet blanket after being up 3 rounds to 1 against the new champion in Alex Pereira. Because as much as it's like, wow, this is now shaking up the division, we have new matchups now. We can do Bobby Knuckles, Robert Whittaker versus Alex Pereira now. We could do fucking Vittori. We could do Hermanson. We could do Derek Brunson, Jared Cannonier. We could have all of these matchups. But Israel Adesanya was winning that fight. And that's exactly, though, why we watch the sport, is because it ain't over till it's over. Israel Adesanya, unfortunately, couldn't get it done, and I think a lot of that has to do with perhaps going away from the grappling and also not being elusive enough when his back was up against the cage, or perhaps being reluctant to throw that right hook or that right hand or that left hook. So congratulations to Alex Pereira. We always congratulate the fighters that go out there and put on a show, and more importantly, you know, shock the world. So I'm happy about that. But it's tough now, because as much as the division perhaps opens up because Alex Pereira is the champion, Israel Adesanya, in fact, does deserve the rematch. He does. But what happens if he loses? He's now lost to Pereira 4 times, and he's cleaned out everybody in the middleweight division. He's going to have to look to go to the 205 division, or perhaps he's going to have to start to look to cash out in the boxing game. And I don't mean that disrespectfully, because Izzy has boxed before, and he wouldn't, you know, go the Jake Paul route. But I just don't know where Izzy goes if he loses to Pereira in the rematch, because we've seen him and we've seen the outcome in everybody else that he fights. So I'm wondering what your thoughts are, where Izzy does go from here, because besides the rematch, obviously the rematch happens, but where does Izzy go from here if he loses to Pereira again? I don't know when that rematch, though, is going to happen, because Izzy did say something very interesting at the post-fight press conference that I hope gets taken a little bit more seriously and gets talked about this week, which was the fact that he almost related himself to Chadwick Boseman, the Black Panther, in, you know, a lot of folks made fun of Chadwick for looking gaunt and very thin without knowing that he was suffering from cancer. You know, Israel was kind of alluding to the fact that he has medical issues as well, and needs to take time off to take care of himself as well. So that's a little bit alarming, a little bit shocking as well. But at the same time, you gotta help but think it can't possibly be something deadly or lethal if the commission is clearing him to get in the octagon. So whatever it is, rest up, champ. Israel Adesanya will absolutely be back. He will get out there and get that rematch against Alex Pereira. And I don't think that fight is going to go any differently in the sense that we are going to be on our feet for the entire time, whether it lasts 1 minute or 25 minutes. Just like we were at UFC 281 at Madison Square Garden, we will absolutely be on our feet and be at the edge of our seat for, how could you be on the edge of your seat and be on your feet at the same time? Exactly. We're going to be fucking ready for that rematch. And we're going to be ready to see if Israel Adesanya could finally reclaim the title, but more importantly, redemption against Alex Pereira, or will Alex Pereira just be that motherfucker and that puzzle and that missing piece that Israel Adesanya could not solve? So that's an interesting one. Congratulations to the UFC for another unforgettable event. UFC 280, UFC 281. These motherfuckers are bangers. AC Radio, we're out, baby.
Big G's, no design on my jacket. Work hard, now I'm changing my bracket. Talk tough, we ain't hear that racket. Dogs came in, you know how to stack it. Don't take it wrong, but I'ma need my ends though. I got tigers on my chest like Kenzo. Rail came, yeah, he putting that Benz though. Carol's here, man, you know he stay 10 toes. Big dog, man, you know I ain't worried. Bent up, so I'm talking real slow.